Welcome, everyone. Ready to dive into some pretty murky waters with this book?
Always up for a challenge. What have we got?
Russian Genocide and the New World Order.
Oh, yeah, that one definitely stirred up some controversy.
No kidding. Accusations of genocide, reshaping global power, ideological battles. This author wasn't messing around.
Nope, and they paid the price for it too. Censorship, backlash, the whole 9 yards.
To really understand what we're dealing with here, I think we need to rewind a bit.
Yeah, back to the late 20th, early 21st century.
Right after the Cold War.
Globalization's going crazy, power structures are shifting, and no one knows what this new world order is going to look like.
Speaking of, can we define that term, New World Order?
It gets thrown around a lot.
Yeah, but what does it actually mean?
In this book, at least, it's a global system, one power on top, controlling everything.
Politically, economically, culturally?
The whole shebang, and the author argues that power is, well, the West.
And Russia's the one getting squeezed out.
That's the gist, yeah.
On purpose.
Oh yeah, the book lays out a whole case, multiple fronts.
Like what?
Economically, sanctions, trade manipulation, that sort of thing.
Politically, then, I'm guessing?
NATO expansion, interventions near Russia's borders.
Then culturally.
Cultural erasure is what they call it.
Okay, now that's getting interesting. What does that even mean? Cultural erasure.
Basically a strategy dominant powers use it to weaken their rivals.
How, though?
Lots of ways, promoting one culture over another, suppressing languages, traditions, even historical narratives.
Control the narrative, control the perception.
Exactly.
But how does this apply to Russia specifically?
The book argues that after the Soviet Union collapsed, there was this systematic effort, to diminish Russian influence, Russian identity, especially in those former Soviet republics.
Give me an example.
Language laws, some of those republics prioritized their national languages over Russian.
So, limited its use in schools, government, all that.
Right. The book also mentions the rewriting of history textbooks, downplaying Russia's role, even alleged discrimination against ethnic Russians in some places.
So it's deeper than just geopolitics. It's about erasing an entire cultural identity.
That's the argument, yeah, and it's all part of a plan. Weaken Russia, prevent it from regaining its power and influence.
Wow, bleak picture for Russia in this New World Order.
Say the least.
Before we go any further, I think we need to talk about the author themselves.
Definitely. Understanding their background is key here.
What can you tell us about them? What led them to write such a controversial book?
Well, the author is a scholar, deep expertise in Russian history and politics, years spent researching the intricacies of Soviet and post-Soviet society, their work. Often challenges those mainstream narratives about Russia.
So not just some armchair theorist.
Not at all. They know their stuff, adds weight to their arguments, controversial or not.
Absolutely, and you mentioned pushback. What kind of resistance did they face while working on this book?
Oh, plenty. Resistance from academic institutions, denied access to certain archives, accusations of being a propagandist.
Really putting our neck out there to get these ideas out.
Yeah, in a way, it kind of reinforces a central argument of the book.
Which is
that there's this effort to silence dissenting voices, especially those challenging the dominant narrative about Russia.
It's a bold claim, but it does make you wonder if it's so easy to dismiss, why try to suppress it?
Right. It makes you think about who benefits from maintaining that certain narrative about Russia and why those alternative viewpoints are met with such hostility.
Okay, so we've got the context, the author's background, this idea of a new world order, but let's get to the heart of it.
The accusation of Russian genocide.
Yeah, it's a loaded term, sensitive, historically and legally. How does the author define it, use it?
It describes what they see as the systematic effort to undermine the survival of ethnic Russians, culturally and demographically, especially after the Soviet collapse.
What kind of evidence are we talking about?
They cite various policies, events, things that demonstrate this intent to erase Russian identity.
Like?
Language laws in some of those former Soviet republics, Ukraine, the Baltic states. They often prioritize the national language over Russian.
Limiting its use in education, government.
All that. And the author argues it wasn't just about promoting national identity.
More about marginalizing Russian speakers.
Exactly. And they connect it to other measures they see as discriminatory, restrictions on Russian media, cultural organizations, even incidents of violence against ethnic Russians.
That's a serious accusation. Is it really fair to call it genocide, though? We usually associate that with mass killings, extermination.
You're right. It's a key point of contention. The author acknowledges it's not genocide in the traditional sense, not mass murder.
So what are they saying?
It's a slower genocide, more insidious, cultural and demographic. The goal is to eliminate a group's identity.
assimilate them.
Right, and the argument is that this cultural erasure, it can be just as devastating in the long run. Loss of language, traditions, a sense of belonging, a kind of cultural death.
I can see how that would be controversial, especially with the historical weight of that term, genocide.
Oh, absolutely. The book got slammed for using it. Lots of scholars pushing back, saying the evidence doesn't meet the legal definition of genocide, needing proof of intent to destroy a group, the whole or in part thing. They also say the situation with ethnic Russians in those former Soviet republics is way more complex. Lots of Russians integrated just fine.
There's room for debate.
Tons. And remember, this book is one perspective, up to the reader to evaluate the evidence, form their own conclusions.
Which leads to another point. The book's reception, when it first came out, how did people react to these claims?
Mixed bag, some praised it, the boldness, challenging those established narratives about Russia.
Saw it as a corrective to what they perceived as Western bias.
Exactly. Russia's side of the story finally being told, but then there was the other side.
The critic.
Fierce criticism, saw it as Russian propaganda, an attempt to justify Russia's actions, disputed the evidence, cherry-picking facts, distorting history to fit the narrative, that sort of thing.
So it just further polarized opinions about Russia.
You could say that, and that polarization, it's in the reviews, the debates about the book's validity, its impact.
Whether you agree or disagree, it definitely got people talking about Russia's place in the world, cultural identity, the legacy of the Soviet Union.
No doubt forced people to confront uncomfortable questions, re-examine assumptions about history, geopolitics, valuable contribution just for that.
We've only scratched the surface here.
Oh yeah, so much more to unpack, especially those claims about the New World Order, what it means for Russia's future.
That's where we'll pick up in the final part of our deep dive.
Looking forward to it.
We'll explore those specific examples the author uses, analyze the potential consequences of this New World Order, consider the book's lasting impact on how we understand Russia's role in the world today.
Sounds like a plan.
Stay with us. Welcome back, still diving deep into Russian genocide and the New World Order. Remember that Russian genocide accusation, just one piece of the puzzle.
Right, part of a bigger argument, this New World Order, a whole system designed to keep Russia down.
Good, let's dig into that, this New World Order. What examples does the author give? How does it actually work to undermine Russia?
They point to a bunch of events, trends, things that fit the pattern, like NATO expansion after the Cold War.
NATO, really?
Yeah, they argue it was deliberate, encircle and contain Russia, push it out of its own backyard, so to speak.
Eastern Europe, that sphere of influence thing.
Exactly, not about spreading democracy and security, more of a power play.
Led by the U.S., of course.
Naturally, assert dominance, prevent any rivals, especially Russia.
And this all ties back to Russian genocide, how?
It's all one big strategy. Weaken and control Russia, NATO expansion, economic sanctions, supporting anti-Russian movements in those former Soviet republics, all part of the plan.
So the West is actively trying to diminish Russia's power globally.
That's the narrative. Pretty provocative, especially these days.
Definitely. What else does the author point to?
The color revolutions in the early 2000s, those popular uprisings, regime change.
In those former Soviet republics?
Right, and the author sees them as orchestrated by the West, or at least heavily influenced.
To install pro-Western governments, chip away at Russia's influence even more.
Exactly, not genuine expressions of the people's will, more like a calculated plan.
Because in the West, we often see them as, victories for democracy.
Right, but the author is offering a completely different interpretation. That's what makes this book so interesting.
Makes you question everything.
Forces you to think about those narratives we've been fed, consider other explanations for how the world got to where it is today.
Let's say, hypothetically, this New World Order exists, as the author describes it. What then? What happens?
Not good things. The author warns about this pursuit of global dominance, one power on top, recipe for instability, conflict.
Pushing Russia too far, that kind of thing.
Exactly. It'll backfire, more resentment, resistance, could even escalate into a bigger confrontation, bad for everyone.
So the solution is?
Multipolarity, power distributed among several key players, Russia being one of them.
More balance, more cooperation, less chance of a major conflict?
That's the idea, more sustainable, more peaceful.
Sounds good in theory, but is it even possible? Especially now, all the tension between Russia and the West.
$1 million question. The author doesn't really give a step-by-step guide, but they say recognizing the dangers of this unipolar system, one power calling all the shots, that's the first step.
toward a more stable, more equitable world.
Right, a powerful message. And it speaks to the book's impact, agree or disagree with the conclusions. It started a conversation.
About power, the post-Soviet world, how to create a more just and peaceful global order.
Russian genocide and the New World Order, it challenges assumptions, provokes debate, forces you to confront uncomfortable truths.
Makes you think.
And that's what makes a book truly impactful, even if you don't buy everything it says.
So engaging with these ideas helps us understand the world better, even if we disagree.
Absolutely. Reminds us there are always multiple perspectives, history is messy, and understanding is a journey, not a destination.
Well said. This deep dive has been quite a journey. Eye-opening, to say the least.
Definitely thought-provoking.
I encourage everyone listening to check out the book for themselves, Russian Genocide and the New World Order. You might agree, you might disagree, you might land somewhere in between, but one thing's for sure, it will make you think. Thanks for joining us.